The sound of a gunshot echoed through the stillness of dawn as Katherine Anderson burst from the dilapidated cabin, clutching a newborn baby to her chest. Blood soaked her tattered dress, leaving a crimson trail behind her as she staggered across the open prairie. Her hair, matted with sweat, whipped wildly in the wind, but she couldn't stop not with what followed her. The year was 1876, and the land outside Dodge City, Kansas, held no mercy for a woman alone. Katherine's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled forward, her vision blurring. The tiny bundle against her breast gave a mewling cry, so fragile it nearly broke her heart. She had delivered this child herself not 20 minutes ago, cutting the cord with a rusted knife and wrapping the infant in the only clean cloth she could find. "Just a little further, little one," she whispered, though she had no destination in mind. The distant silhouette of Dodge City shimmered on the horizon like a mirage. "We'll find help. We'll find." Her foot caught on a prairie dog hole, sending her sprawling. Katherine twisted mid-fall, taking the impact on her shoulder to protect the newborn. Pain lanced through her body, adding to the agony of her still bleeding womb. For a moment, she lay still, staring up at the endless Kansas sky as it shifted from purple dawn to pale blue. "Madam." The deep voice startled her. Katherine clutched her baby tighter and struggled to sit up, squinting against the morning sun. A tall figure on horseback loomed over her, backlit by the dawn. "Stay back," she warned, her voice weak but determined. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, and she could see him more clearly now, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and kind eyes beneath the brim of his Stetson. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but well kept. A cowboy, with a star pinned to his vest. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his distance as he crouched down. "I'm Deputy Daniel Fletcher of Dodge City." His gaze swept over her blood-soaked dress, then to the tiny bundle in her arms. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You just had that baby, didn't you?" Katherine nodded, unable to find words as exhaustion threatened to claim her. The baby whimpered again, its tiny face scrunching up. "There's blood everywhere," Daniel said, his voice urgent but calm. "You need help. Let me take you to town." "No," Katherine protested weakly. "They'll find me there. They'll take her." Daniel's expression hardened. "Who's after you, madam?" Before she could answer, the distant thunder of hoofbeats carried across the prairie. Katherine's face drained of what little color remained. "Please," she whispered, "help us." Without hesitation, Daniel scooped Katherine and her child into his arms and carried them to his horse. With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he helped her into the saddle before mounting behind her. "Hold on tight to that little one," he murmured in her ear as he urged his horse into motion. "I know somewhere safe." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Daniel guided his horse away from town, toward a small homestead nestled against a copse of cottonwoods. Katherine felt consciousness slipping away, the pain and blood loss taking their toll. The last thing she remembered was the steady heartbeat of the deputy against her back and his quiet promise, "You're safe now." When Katherine awoke, she was lying on a clean bed in a modest but well-kept cabin. Her dress had been replaced with a simple nightgown, and the piercing pain in her abdomen had dulled to a persistent ache. Panic seized her as she realized her arms were empty. "My baby," she gasped, struggling to sit up. "She's right here," came a gentle female voice. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached the bedside, carefully cradling the newborn wrapped in a soft blanket. "Such a beautiful little girl. You did well bringing her into this world." Relief flooded Katherine as the woman placed the infant in her arms. The baby was clean now, her skin pink and perfect, with a shock of dark hair crowning her tiny head. "Where am I?" Katherine asked, looking around the unfamiliar room. "This is my mother's place," Daniel said, stepping into the doorway. He had removed his hat and gun belt, making him look less like a lawman and more like any hard-working rancher. "Ma's a midwife. Best one in 3 counties. The older woman smiled. "Martha Fletcher. And don't let my son's modesty fool you, he's the best deputy Dodge City's ever had." "Katherine Anderson," she replied, offering her name for the first time. "And this is—" She hesitated, looking down at her daughter. "This is Hope." "A fine name," Martha nodded approvingly. "Now you've lost a lot of blood, Katherine. You need to rest and regain your strength." "I can't stay," Katherine protested, though her body betrayed her with its weakness. "It's not safe." Daniel moved closer, pulling a chair beside the bed. "Who's after you, Katherine? I can help, but you need to tell me what's happening." Katherine looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, then back at the deputy. There was something about his steady gaze that made her want to trust him, despite everything she'd been through. "My husband died 6 months ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or so I thought. Thomas Anderson was a gambler and a cheat. I found out later he faked his death to escape his debts." She paused, fighting back tears. 3 months ago, a man named Victor Blackwell came to my door in St. Louis, said Thomas had stolen money from him before disappearing. A lot of money. "And he thought you had it," Daniel concluded. Katherine nodded. "When I couldn't pay, he said he'd take other forms of compensation." Her hand tightened around her baby. "I was already with child by then, Thomas's child. I fled west, hoping to disappear. I've been hiding in that abandoned cabin for 2 weeks, waiting for the baby to come." "And Blackwell found you," Daniel said, his jaw tightening. "His men did. Last night. I heard them outside while I was in labor. When they broke in, I had a gun, Thomas's revolver. I fired it and ran." Daniel exchanged a glance with his mother. "Did you hit anyone?" "I don't know. It was dark and everything happened so fast." Martha gently touched Katherine's shoulder. "You did what you had to do to protect your child." "You're safe here," Daniel assured her. "No one in town knows about my mother's place. We'll figure this out." Katherine wanted to believe him, but fear had been her constant companion for too long. "Your mother has been kind, but I can't put your family in danger." "You're not going anywhere for at least a week," Martha said firmly. "Not until you're strong enough. And by then," Daniel added, "I'll have dealt with Blackwell and his men." Katherine looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She found none, only determination and something else, something warm that made her heart flutter despite her exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered as hope stirred against her breast. "Rest now," Daniel said, standing. "You're both safe here." As he left the room, Katherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The faint glimmer of hope, as fragile and precious as the new life in her arms. For 3 days, Katherine barely left the bed, her body demanding the rest it desperately needed. Martha Fletcher proved to be not only a skilled midwife but a gentle mentor, teaching Katherine how to nurse her infant daughter and care for her postpartum body. Daniel came and went, bringing supplies from town and news that remained troublingly vague. On the 4th day, Katherine was strong enough to sit in a chair by the window, Hope sleeping peacefully in a handcrafted cradle beside her. "You're looking better," Daniel observed as he entered the cabin, stomping dust from his boots. "More color in your cheeks." "Your mother's a miracle worker," Katherine replied, "and a wonderful cook." Martha waved away the compliment as she stirred a pot of stew on the stove. "Just old family recipes and common sense." Daniel pulled off his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. "I checked that cabin where you were staying," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Found signs of a struggle, blood on the floor." Katherine's heart raced. "And no bodies, but there were tracks heading back toward town. 3 horses." "They're still looking for me," she whispered. Most likely, Daniel agreed, not sugarcoating the situation. I've been asking around town, careful-like. 3 strangers have been staying at the Dodge house for nearly a week, not typical cowboys or travelers. They keep to themselves, but they've been asking questions. Martha frowned. Blackwell's men, I believe so. No sign of Blackwell himself, though. Catherine's hands trembled as she clutched the fabric of her borrowed dress. What do we do? Daniel knelt beside her chair. We keep you hidden until you're strong enough to travel. Then I'll escort you somewhere safe, maybe Denver or even California. I have nothing, Katherine admitted, shame coloring her words. No money, no possessions beyond what I carried with me. That doesn't matter right now, Daniel assured her. What matters is keeping you and Hope safe. The baby stirred at the sound of her name, her tiny hands reaching up as her eyes fluttered open. Daniel smiled down at her, genuine wonder crossing his weathered features. May I? He asked, gesturing toward the cradle. Katherine nodded, surprised by his interest. Most men she'd known considered babies women's domain, not worth their attention until the children could at least walk and talk. Daniel gently lifted Hope, cradling her with unexpected skill. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You've had quite a journey already, haven't you?" Hope gazed up at him, her newborn blue eyes seeming to focus on his face with unlikely intensity. One tiny fist escaped the blanket, reaching up to touch his chin. "She likes you," Katherine observed, touched by the tender moment. Daniel smiled. "Smart girl. She knows who's on her side." He looked up at Katherine, his expression growing more serious. "I promise you, I won't let anything happen to either of you." Martha cleared her throat. "Dinner's nearly ready. Daniel, set Hope back down and wash up." As Daniel carefully returned the baby to her cradle, Katherine found herself studying him, the strength in his hands, the kindness in his eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke of determination and integrity. He was nothing like Thomas, whose handsome face had hidden a weak and selfish heart. Daniel caught her watching him and held her gaze for a moment. Something passed between them, unspoken but real. Katherine looked away first, her cheeks warming. That night, after Martha and Daniel had retired to their rooms, Katherine sat up with Hope, nursing her in the silver moonlight that streamed through the window. For the first time since her husband's betrayal, she allowed herself to imagine a future, one where she and her daughter weren't always running, always afraid. Daniel Fletcher featured prominently in that imagined future, though she chided herself for such foolish thoughts. He was a good man doing his duty, nothing more. When this was over, he would return to his life, and she would build a new one somewhere far from Kansas. Yet as Hope's tiny fingers curled around her own, Katherine couldn't help but wish for something more than just safety, for a home, for belonging, for love. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Katherine grew stronger, walking a little farther each day, first around the cabin, then in the enclosed yard behind it. Hope thrived under Martha's expert guidance, gaining weight and beginning to focus her eyes on the world around her. Daniel continued his duties in town, watchful for any sign that Blackwell's men had discovered their location. Each evening, he returned with supplies and stories to distract Katherine from her worries. On the 7th day, Katherine was hanging laundry in the yard when Daniel rode in earlier than usual, his expression grim. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing his tension. "Blackwell himself arrived in Dodge City this morning," Daniel said, dismounting quickly. "Staying at the Dodge house with his men, making no secret of looking for a woman with a newborn." Katherine's blood ran cold. "What's he telling people? That you're his sister, unstable in the mind, who ran off with his newborn nephew. Says he's worried about the child's safety." "That's a lie," Katherine exclaimed. "Hope is my daughter, not his." "I know," Daniel assured her, taking her trembling hands in his. "But it's a story that gets people's sympathy, makes them want to help him find you." Martha appeared in the doorway, Hope bundled in her arms. "Inside, both of you. We need to plan." Around the kitchen table, Daniel laid out what he knew. Blackwell's offering a substantial reward, $200 for information leading to Katherine and the baby. "That kind of money will have every desperate soul for miles looking," Martha said gravely. "We need to leave," Katherine decided. "Tonight, while it's dark." Daniel shook his head. "That's what they'll expect. They've already got men watching the roads out of town." "Then what do you suggest?" Katherine asked, fear making her voice sharp. "We hide in plain sight," Daniel said. "In town itself?" Martha looked skeptical. "How would that work?" Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Katherine. "As my wife." The words hung in the air between them. "Your wife," Katherine repeated. "It's the perfect cover," Daniel explained. "I have a house in town that few people visit. Most folks know I've been away checking on my mother. If I return with a wife and newborn, it would explain my absence." "But won't people wonder where this wife came from?" Martha asked. Daniel nodded. "We'll say we were married in Wichita before I took this position. Katherine's been living there until the baby came, but now she's ready to join me. It's not uncommon many men establish themselves before bringing their families west." "What about Blackwell?" Katherine asked. "Won't he recognize me?" "Not if we're careful. You'll need to change your appearance some, and we'll have to be strategic about when you're seen in town." Katherine looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her arms, unaware of the danger surrounding her. "You do this for us. Pretend to be married." Daniel's eyes softened. "I swore to protect and serve when I took this badge. I intend to keep that oath." Something in his tone suggested there might be more to his motivation than professional duty, but Katherine didn't dare examine that too closely. "It would only be temporary," she said, more to herself than to him, "until Blackwell gives up and leaves." "Of course," Daniel agreed, though something flickered in his eyes. "Temporary." Martha watched them both with knowing eyes. "You'll need a ring," she said practically. "And wedding papers, forged though they may be." "I can handle that," Daniel assured them. "I know a man in town who's discreet." Katherine's mind raced with the implications. To share a home with this man, to pretend to be his wife, to let the world believe they were a family. It was madness. And yet it might be their only chance. "When?" she asked finally. "Tomorrow night," Daniel decided. "I'll make the arrangements in town tomorrow, then come back here after dark. We'll ride in together, as if returning from a visit to my mother's." Martha nodded approvingly. "I'll pack provisions for you and some things for the baby." As night fell, Katherine sat by the window, rocking Hope gently. Outside, the vast Kansas sky glittered with stars, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. "Are we doing the right thing, little one?" she whispered to her daughter. "Trusting our lives to a man we barely know." But even as she voiced her doubts, Katherine knew that Daniel Fletcher was unlike any man she had met before. In the short time she'd known him, he had shown more integrity and kindness than Thomas had in their entire marriage. Still, the prospect of posing as his wife made her heart race with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Fear, certainly, but also something else, something warmer that bloomed in her chest whenever he smiled at her. "It's just for our safety," she reminded herself sternly. "Nothing more." But as she placed Hope in the cradle and prepared for bed, Katherine couldn't help wondering what it might be like to truly be Daniel Fletcher's wife, not out of necessity, but by choice. The following day passed in a flurry of preparations. Martha helped Katherine alter one of her old dresses to fit her postpartum figure, while teaching her what to expect as a new mother in the coming weeks. They packed a small trunk with essentials for her and Hope, including the few items Katherine had carried with her from the cabin. Daniel returned after sunset, his saddlebags bulging with supplies. "It's done," he announced. "Marriage certificate courtesy of a friend who owes me a favor, and this," he produced a simple gold band. "It was my grandmother's." Katherine stared at the ring, its significance suddenly making their plan feel very real. "I can't take your family heirloom. It's the only way this will be convincing," Daniel insisted, holding it out to her. "Please." With trembling fingers, Katherine accepted the ring and slipped it onto her left hand. It fit perfectly, as if made for her. "How do I look?" she asked, smoothing down the blue calico dress Martha had altered. "Like a respectable deputy's wife," Martha approved. "But we need to do something about your hair." Katherine's long auburn tresses had been her pride once. Now, Martha helped her pin it up in a more matronly style, adding a bonnet that shadowed her face. "Remember," Daniel instructed as they prepared to leave, "you're Katherine Fletcher now, my wife of just over a year. We met in Wichita where your father was a shopkeeper." Katherine nodded, committing the details to memory. "And Hope, our daughter, born 2 weeks ago. We named her after your mother." The story was simple enough to remember, yet intimate enough to seem real. Katherine wondered how much thought Daniel had given to crafting their false history. As Martha hugged her goodbye, the older woman whispered, "Trust your heart, dear. It knows more than your head sometimes." Before Katherine could ask what she meant, Daniel was helping her onto the wagon he'd brought, carefully placing Hope's makeshift basket between them. The trunk was secured in the back, along with a few crates of supplies to maintain the illusion they'd been visiting his mother's homestead. "Ready?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle in the darkness. Katherine clutched Hope closer and nodded. "As I'll ever be." The journey into Dodge City took less than an hour, but to Katherine, it felt like crossing into another world. The lights of the town glowed on the horizon, growing brighter as they approached. The main street was still lively despite the late hour, with saloons and gambling halls doing brisk business. Daniel guided the wagon down a side street, away from the noise and crowds. "My house is at the edge of town," he explained. "Not grand, but comfortable enough." The home that came into view was indeed modest, a small clapboard structure with a covered porch and neat yard. A lantern hung by the door, casting a welcoming glow. "Home sweet home, Mrs. Fletcher," Daniel said, with an attempt at lightness that didn't quite mask his nervousness. As he helped her down from the wagon, Katherine was acutely aware of his hands at her waist, strong and steady. Hope stirred in her basket, making small noises that might soon become cries. "Let's get you both inside," Daniel said. "I've asked Mrs. Reynolds next door to stock the pantry, so there should be food." The interior of the house was simple but well kept. A main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a kitchen beyond it. A narrow staircase led to what Katherine presumed were bedrooms above. "It's lovely," she said, and meant it. After weeks of running and hiding, the small house felt like a palace. Daniel looked pleased at her approval. "The larger bedroom upstairs is yours and Hope's. I've put a cradle in there that I borrowed from the Millers. Their youngest outgrew it last month." "And where will you sleep?" Katherine asked, suddenly realizing the awkwardness of their arrangement. "I'll take the small room down here," he said, gesturing to a door off the main room. "Used to be a storage space, but I cleared it out." "It's small, but it'll do." A cry from Hope interrupted them. Katherine quickly moved to soothe her daughter, recognizing the hungry sounds. "I should feed her," she said, suddenly self-conscious. "Of course," Daniel replied, grabbing their trunk. "I'll take this upstairs while you—" "I'll give you privacy." As Katherine settled into a chair to nurse Hope, she watched Daniel carry their belongings upstairs, his movements efficient and considerate. This strange domestic scene, a man and woman going about the business of setting up home together, felt both foreign and oddly natural. Later, after Hope was fed and sleeping in her borrowed cradle, Katherine stood by the upstairs window, looking out at the town that was to be her temporary haven. Somewhere out there, Victor Blackwell was searching for her, determined to take what she wouldn't willingly give. A soft knock at the door frame drew her attention. Daniel stood there, hesitant to enter what was now her private space. "I wanted to check that you have everything you need," he said. "We do, thank you." Katherine turned from the window. "Daniel, I don't know how to repay you for all this." He shook his head. "There's nothing to repay. I'm doing what any decent man would do." "We both know that's not true," Katherine said softly. "Most men wouldn't risk their reputation and career for a stranger." Daniel stepped into the room, his eyes earnest. "You're not a stranger, Katherine." "Not anymore." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Katherine was suddenly very aware of her unbound hair falling over her shoulders and the thin nightgown she wore beneath her wrapper. Daniel cleared his throat and took a step back. "Tomorrow we'll need to make a brief appearance in town. Just enough to establish our story, then you can return home with Hope while I continue my duties." "Will it be safe?" she asked. "I believe so. Blackwell doesn't know what you look like, only that you're a woman with a newborn. As Mrs. Fletcher, you'll hide in plain sight." Katherine nodded, trusting his judgment. "Good night, then, husband." The word felt strange on her tongue, yet not entirely unwelcome. Daniel's eyes darkened at the sound of it. "Good night, wife," he replied, his voice rough. With a brief nod, he retreated, closing the door softly behind him. Katherine stared at the closed door for a long moment, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm in her chest. This arrangement was meant to be practical, a matter of survival. So why did it feel like something more was taking root between them? With a sigh, she turned to check on Hope once more before climbing into the unfamiliar bed. As exhaustion pulled her toward sleep, Katherine realized that for the first time in months, she felt truly safe. Morning came with the crowing of a neighbor's rooster and the distant sounds of Dodge City awakening. Katherine rose to feed Hope, marveling at how quickly her daughter was growing. At 2 weeks old, she was already more alert, her eyes tracking movements and her tiny hands grasping reflexively at anything within reach. After dressing in her best and only good dress, Katherine ventured downstairs to find Daniel at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. "You cook," she observed, surprised. He looked up with a smile that transformed his serious face. "Bachelor living teaches a man many skills. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep you from starving." Katherine set Hope's basket on the table and moved to help, setting out plates and cups she found in the cupboard. The domesticity of the scene struck her again, how easily they moved around each other, as if they'd been sharing this space for years rather than hours. "What's our plan for today?" she asked as they sat down to eat. Daniel sipped his coffee before answering. "Church first. Most of the town will be there, including the more respectable citizens we need to convince. Then a brief walk down the main street, perhaps a stop at the general store. Nothing too taxing given your recent childbirth." Katherine nodded, appreciating his thoughtfulness. "And Blackwell, not likely to be at church, but his men might be watching the town. That's why it's important you're seen clearly as my wife, not a woman in hiding." After breakfast, they set out for the small church at the edge of town. Daniel drove the wagon slowly, mindful of Hope sleeping in Katherine's arms. As they approached, Katherine felt her anxiety rising. "What if someone recognizes me?" she whispered. Daniel's hand covered hers briefly. "Keep your head high and remember you belong here now. You're Mrs. Fletcher, and no one has reason to think otherwise." His confidence steadied her as he helped her down from the wagon, one hand at her elbow, the other carrying Hope's basket. They made quite a picture. She realized the handsome deputy and his family arriving for Sunday service. Heads turned as they entered the church, curious eyes taking in the new arrivals. Daniel nodded politely to several people, his demeanor relaxed but protective as he guided Katherine to a pew midway down the aisle. Deputy Fletcher, a portly man, greeted them, his wife at his side. "We'd heard rumors you'd taken a wife, but I scarcely believed it." "Mayor Phillips," Daniel replied with an easy smile. "May I present my wife, Katherine, and our daughter, Hope?" Katherine forced herself to smile, keeping her face partially shadowed by her bonnet. "A pleasure to meet you, Mayor." Mrs. Phillips leaned in to coo at Hope. "Such a beautiful child." "And how are you faring, my dear? Childbirth is no small ordeal." "I'm recovering well, thank you," Katherine replied, the half-truth coming easily. "Daniel's mother has been a tremendous help." "Martha always did have a healing touch," the mayor agreed. "Well, we must let you settle in. Perhaps you'll join us for dinner one evening when you're stronger." Daniel squeezed Katherine's hand in silent support. "We'd be delighted, once Katherine's fully recovered." As the service began, Katherine found herself surrounded by the rhythms of normalcy hymns and prayers, the drone of the minister's sermon, the rustle of Sunday best clothing. Hope slept peacefully throughout, as if sensing the need for discretion. Katherine was just beginning to relax when a late arrival slipped into the church. The man was expensively dressed, with a neatly trimmed beard and cold eyes that scanned the congregation with calculation. Something about him made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Daniel tensed beside her. "Blackwell," he whispered, barely moving his lips. Katherine's heart hammered in her chest. She kept her head bowed, grateful for the bonnet that partially obscured her face. Blackwell's gaze swept over them without pausing, clearly looking for a woman alone, not a deputy's wife. When the service ended, Daniel maneuvered them toward the exit, keeping himself between Katherine and Blackwell. They were almost to the door when the mayor intercepted them, unwittingly drawing attention their way. "Fletcher, before you go, I'd like you to meet a visitor to our town. Mr. Blackwell, this is our deputy, Daniel Fletcher." Katherine froze, hope clutched to her chest as Blackwell approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall and immaculately dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. "Deputy," Blackwell acknowledged with a nod. His gaze shifted to Katherine, who kept her head appropriately lowered as a modest wife would. "And Mrs. Fletcher, I presume?" "My wife, yes," Daniel confirmed, his arm protectively circling Katherine's waist. "And our daughter." Blackwell leaned slightly to peer at Hope. Katherine's entire body tensed, ready to flee, but Daniel's steady presence anchored her. "A beautiful family," Blackwell commented, his smile not reaching his eyes. "How fortunate for you, Deputy. I'm in town searching for my sister and her newborn son. Poor thing is not well in the mind, I'm afraid. Ran away shortly after the birth." "How concerning," Daniel replied, his tone professionally sympathetic. "The marshal's office will certainly assist in any way possible." "I appreciate that," Blackwell said, his gaze lingering on Katherine just a moment too long. "Your wife seems rather pale, Deputy. Perhaps the new mother should rest." "Indeed," Daniel agreed. "If you'll excuse us, Mr. Blackwell." As they made their way to the wagon, Katherine could feel Blackwell's eyes on her back. Only when they were moving down the street did she allow herself to breathe normally again. "He suspects something," she whispered. Daniel's jaw was tight. "He's a predator. They sense fear. But he doesn't know for certain, and as long as we maintain our story, he has no reason to connect you with the woman he's hunting." "He said he's looking for a woman with a newborn son," Katherine noted. "He doesn't even know Hope is a girl." That works in our favor, Daniel agreed. But we still need to be careful. They stopped briefly at the general store, where Daniel introduced Katherine to the proprietor and his wife. The woman was friendly, offering advice on caring for a newborn and promising to send over some hand-me-down baby clothes from her own children. By the time they returned to the house, Katherine was exhausted from the strain of maintaining their charade. Hope was fussing, hungry and uncomfortable from the morning's activities. "You should rest," Daniel suggested as he helped her inside. "I need to report to the marshal's office, but I won't be gone long." Katherine nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him leave. In his presence, she felt protected, despite the morning's close call. "Be careful," she said. "Blackwell is more dangerous than he appears." Daniel touched her cheek briefly, the gesture surprisingly intimate. "I know men like him, Katherine, and I won't let him hurt you or Hope." After he left, Katherine fed Hope and laid her in the cradle for a nap. The house felt strangely empty without Daniel's presence, though she'd only spent one night under his roof. Moving to the window, she watched the street outside, half expecting to see Blackwell lurking nearby. Instead, she saw only the normal activity of a Sunday afternoon in a frontier town, families returning from church. A few cowboys heading toward the saloons, women visiting neighbors. The ordinariness of it all made her long for a life she'd never had, a real marriage, a true home, a place of belonging. "This is just temporary," she reminded herself aloud. "Once Blackwell is gone, we'll move on." Yet even as she spoke the words, Katherine wondered where they would go, and whether Daniel would truly let them walk away when the danger had passed. For the next several days, Katherine maintained the pretense of being Mrs. Fletcher, appearing briefly in town with Hope, always at Daniel's side. They developed a routine of sorts: breakfast together before Daniel left for his duties, a quiet dinner in the evening where they would discuss the day's events. At night, they retired to separate rooms, though Katherine often lay awake, listening to Daniel moving about downstairs, the sound oddly comforting. On the 5th day of their arrangement, Katherine was hanging laundry in the small backyard when she heard a knock at the front door. Freezing in place, she listened as a woman's voice called out, "Mrs. Fletcher, it's Sarah Jenkins from the general store. I've brought those baby things I promised." Katherine relaxed slightly, but remained cautious as she went to answer the door. Sarah Jenkins was indeed standing on the porch, a basket of baby clothes in her arms and a friendly smile on her face. "I hope I'm not intruding," Sarah said. "I know new mothers need their rest." "Not at all," Katherine replied, inviting her in. "Hope is sleeping, but I was just doing some chores." Sarah set the basket on the table. "These belong to my youngest. She's 3 now, so we've no more use for them. There are some gowns and blankets, even a few toys." "You're very kind," Katherine said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Please, would you like some tea?" As they sat together, Katherine found herself warming to the storekeeper's wife. Sarah was straightforward and lacking in pretension, her conversation full of practical advice about raising a child in Dodge City. "Your Daniel seems a good man," Sarah commented, stirring her tea. "Not like some of the men who wear a badge in these parts." "He is," Katherine agreed, finding no need to pretend on this point. "I'm very fortunate." Sarah smiled knowingly. "Love looks good on you both. Anyone can see it when he looks at you." Katherine nearly choked on her tea. "I thank you." "Oh, I'm embarrassing you," Sarah laughed. "Forgive me. It's just nice to see a happy couple in this town, especially with that dreadful business going around." "What business?" Katherine asked, trying to sound merely curious. "This man Blackwell looking for his sister. Such a sad tale. He was in the store yesterday, showing a sketch of the woman. Said she's quite disturbed, might harm the baby." Katherine's blood ran cold. A sketch. Yes, though not a very good one if you ask me. Could be any woman with dark hair. He's offering $200 to anyone who finds her. My Jacob told him we don't deal in bounty hunting. Thank you very much. I'm sure the marshal's office is handling it, Katherine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Oh, your Daniel certainly is. Made it clear to Blackwell that any search for this woman would be conducted properly, not by hired guns. Sarah looked pleased. Put that fancy man right in his place, he did. After Sarah left, Katherine sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. Blackwell was escalating his search, circulating a sketch that might identify her. Even with her changed appearance, if the likeness was close enough, someone might make the connection. When Daniel returned that evening, she told him about Sarah's visit and the sketch. His expression darkened. I've seen it, he confirmed. It's vague enough that you're still safe, but Blackwell's getting desperate. His men have been searching the area around the cabin where you stayed. What if they find evidence that leads them here? Katherine asked, pacing the small parlor. Hope lay on a blanket nearby, kicking her tiny legs. Daniel caught Katherine's hand as she passed him, stopping her nervous movement. Katherine, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, finding strength in his steady gaze. I've arranged for a friend to take you and Hope to Wichita if things get worse, he said. He's a stagecoach driver, trustworthy. From there, you could take a train east. You've thought this through, she observed. I have to. Protecting you and Hope is my priority. Katherine searched his face, seeing more than professional duty in his expression. Why are you doing all this, Daniel? The truth. He held her gaze for a long moment before answering. When I found you on the prairie that morning, bleeding and desperate but still fighting to protect your child, I knew you were the bravest person I'd ever met. And every day since has only confirmed that. That doesn't answer my question, she said softly. Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. Doesn't it? I care about what happens to you, Katherine. More than I should, perhaps. The air between them vibrated with unspoken feelings. Katherine was acutely aware of how close they stood, how easy it would be to lean forward and close the distance between them. Hope chose that moment to let out a wail, breaking the tension. Katherine pulled her hand free and moved to pick up her daughter. I should feed her, she said, not meeting Daniel's eyes. He nodded, stepping back. I'll check on things at the marshal's office. Lock the door behind me. As he left, Katherine held Hope close, her emotions in turmoil. What was happening between her and Daniel wasn't part of their plan. She'd sworn after Thomas that she would never again be vulnerable to a man, never again trust her heart to someone who could betray her. Yet Daniel Fletcher was nothing like Thomas Anderson. Where her husband had been charming but weak, Daniel was steadfast and true. Where Thomas had placed his own desires above all else, Daniel risked everything to protect her and a child not his own. What do you think, little one? She whispered to Hope. Is it possible to find love twice in a lifetime? Even after everything? Hope gurgled in response, her tiny face scrunching up in what almost looked like a smile. For the first time since her world had collapsed, Katherine allowed herself to imagine a future filled with something more than mere survival, a future with Daniel. But first, they had to survive Blackwell. The next day brought rain, sheets of it pouring from a leaden sky. The weather kept Katherine and Hope indoors, which suited their circumstances. Daniel left early, promising to return by midday with supplies. When noon came and went with no sign of him, Katherine began to worry. By mid-afternoon, her concern had grown to genuine fear. Daniel was never late without sending word. Just as she was considering whether to risk going out to look for him, the front door burst open. Daniel stumbled in, soaked to the skin and sporting a cut above his eye. Daniel, Katherine rushed to him, helping him to a chair. What happened? Blackwell's men, he grunted, wincing as she touched the cut on his forehead. Cornered me in the alley behind the marshal's office. Katherine quickly fetched a cloth and basin of water. How many were there? 3. I managed to fight them off, but not before this. He gestured to his injury. As she cleaned the wound, Katherine noticed other bruises forming on his face and a split in his lip. They could have killed you. That wasn't their intention. They wanted information about you. Katherine's hands stilled. What did they say? That Blackwell knows I helped a woman and child the day he arrived in the area. Someone saw us on the road. Daniel caught her hand. They don't know you're here, Katherine, but they're suspicious of me. This is my fault, she whispered. You're in danger because of me. No, Daniel said firmly. I'm in danger because men like Blackwell think they can take whatever they want without consequences, but I'm not without resources. He reached into his coat and pulled out a telegram. This came today. Thomas Anderson was arrested in St. Louis 2 days ago. Katherine stared at him in shock. Thomas, my husband, ex-husband, if what you told me about faking his death is true. He was caught trying to sell stolen bonds, the same ones he supposedly took from Blackwell. Hope for the first time in months, but Katherine had seen too many false promises to trust it completely. What does this mean for us? It means Blackwell's claim against you is falling apart. The marshal in St. Louis is investigating him now, too. Blackwell knows his time is running out. That's why he's getting desperate. Which makes him more dangerous, Katherine concluded. Daniel nodded grimly. You and Hope need to leave Dodge City. Tonight. No, Katherine protested. I won't run anymore, and I won't leave you to face Blackwell alone. Katherine, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, she insisted. Running hasn't solved anything. As long as Blackwell is free, we'll never be safe. Daniel stood, pacing the small room despite his injuries. What do you suggest? That we confront him directly? No, we let the law do its work. Katherine's mind was racing. If Thomas has been arrested and there's an investigation into Blackwell, then we just need to hold out until official word comes from St. Louis. That could take days, even weeks. Then we'll wait, together. Katherine stepped closer to him. I'm tired of running, Daniel, tired of being afraid. Hope deserves better than a life on the run, and so do I. Daniel looked down at her, his expression torn between admiration and frustration. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. So you've said before, she reminded him with a small smile. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite his calloused fingers. If you stay, you have to promise to follow my instructions exactly if things get dangerous. I promise, Katherine agreed. As Daniel's thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, the atmosphere between them shifted once again. They stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Katherine, he murmured, her name a question and a declaration all at once. She answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly deepened with shared hunger. His arms came around her, strong and protective, as her hands found his shoulders, then the nape of his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment you woke up in my mother's house. Katherine smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression. I think I've wanted you to since then as well. A cry from Hope's basket reminded them they weren't alone. Katherine reluctantly stepped back, though Daniel's hand remained at her waist. This changes things, he said softly. Does it? She asked, suddenly uncertain. Their arrangement was meant to be temporary, a charade for her protection. Yet what had just passed between them felt anything but false. Not how I feel, Daniel clarified. But what happens next, if you and Hope are to stay in Dodge City after Blackwell is gone? If, Katherine echoed, her heart suddenly racing for a different reason. Daniel took a deep breath. I'm asking if you would consider making our arrangement permanent, not out of necessity but because I love you, Katherine. You and Hope both. The words hung in the air between them, momentous and transformative. Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes. You hardly know me, she protested weakly. I know enough, Daniel replied, his voice steady with conviction. I know your courage and your strength. I know how fiercely you love your daughter. I know that in the short time you've been in my life, you've become essential to my happiness. Katherine wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to trust in the future he offered, but fear and doubt still lingered. What if you regret it? She whispered. Taking on another man's child, a woman with a past like mine, Daniel's expression softened. Hope is a blessing, not a burden. And your past has made you who you are, the woman I've fallen in love with. Before Katherine could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Daniel whirled toward the source, the front window, now sporting a jagged hole where a rock had come through. Get down, he ordered, pushing Katherine toward the floor and drawing his gun in one fluid motion. Katherine crawled to Hope's basket, pulling it closer as Daniel moved cautiously to the window. See anyone? She whispered. No, but they're out there. Daniel's voice was tight with anger. Stay here. Before she could protest, he was moving toward the door, gun ready. Katherine clutched Hope to her chest, terrified that the happiness she just glimpsed might be ripped away before it truly began. The front door opened and closed quietly as Daniel slipped out into the rain. Katherine waited, counting each second with racing heart. 1 minute passed, then 2. A gunshot cracked through the air, followed by shouting. Katherine's whole body tensed. She couldn't just wait here, not knowing what was happening to Daniel. Decision made, she placed Hope in the bottom drawer of the dresser, padding it with blankets to make a makeshift cradle. I'll be back for you, my love, she promised, kissing her daughter's forehead. Katherine moved to the kitchen and grabbed a carving knife, the only weapon at hand, then crept toward the front door. The shouting had stopped, but she could hear men's voices, one of them Daniel's, coming from the side of the house. Easing the door open, Katherine peered out into the rain. 3 figures struggled at the corner of the property, Daniel and 2 larger men. Even as she watched, one of the men landed a heavy blow to Daniel's jaw, sending him staggering. Without thinking, Katherine burst from the house, knife in hand. Leave him alone, she shouted, her voice cutting through the downpour. All 3 men turned toward her. One was Blackwell himself, his fine clothes soaked and mudded, his face twisted with rage and triumph. Well, well, he said, his voice carrying despite the rain. If it isn't Mrs. Anderson, or should I say Mrs. Fletcher? Your disguise was clever, but not clever enough. Daniel used the distraction to drive his elbow into the ribs of the man holding him. The thug doubled over, and Daniel broke free, moving to place himself between Katherine and Blackwell. It's over, Blackwell, he said, his voice steady despite the blood trickling from his split lip. The marshal in St. Louis is investigating you. Thomas Anderson has been arrested. Blackwell laughed, a harsh sound. By the time any official communication reaches Dodge City, I'll be long gone with what's owed to me. Nothing is owed to you, Katherine said, her grip tight on the knife. Thomas stole from you, not me. Your husband borrowed money against collateral and the child he assured me was coming. Blackwell's smile was cold. A debt is a debt, Mrs. Anderson, however it was incurred. Daniel's body tensed with fury. You're talking about human beings, Blackwell, a woman and an innocent child. I'm talking about property, Blackwell corrected, drawing a pistol from his coat. And I always collect what's mine. Everything happened at once then. Daniel lunged for Blackwell as the gun came up. Katherine screamed a warning. The second thug, recovered now, grabbed her from behind. The knife clattered from her hand as she struggled. A gunshot split the air, deafening in the small yard. Katherine froze, terrified to look, certain that Daniel had been hit. But it was Blackwell who staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as a crimson stain spread across his expensive shirt. Behind him stood Martha Fletcher, a smoking shotgun in her hands. "Get your hands off my daughter-in-law," she said to the thug holding Katherine, her voice like steel, "or you'll join your employer." The man released Katherine immediately, raising his hands. Daniel, recovering from the shock, quickly moved to secure both men. "Mother," he said, a world of questions in that single word. "Did you think I wouldn't come check on you after 3 days of rain and no word?" Martha replied, lowering the shotgun slightly. A mother knows when her children are in trouble. Katherine ran to Daniel, needing to assure herself he was alive and whole. His arms came around her automatically, strong and steady despite his injuries. "Hope?" he asked urgently. "Safe inside," she assured him. As the rain continued to fall, washing blood and fear from the small yard, Katherine felt something settle within her, a certainty that had been building since the moment Daniel Fletcher had found her on the prairie with a newborn in her arms. "I love you," she said, the words flowing naturally now. "And yes, I'll stay in Dodge City. I'll be your wife in truth, not just pretense." Daniel's smile was bright enough to pierce the gloom of the stormy day. "I'll hold you to that promise, Mrs. Fletcher." 3 days later, Katherine stood at the window of what was now truly her home, watching as the stagecoach carrying Blackwell's men departed for St. Louis. The man himself was in the town doctor's care, under guard until he was well enough to travel. Martha's shot had been serious but not fatal, a mercy Blackwell scarcely deserved. A telegraph from St. Louis had confirmed everything. Thomas Anderson was in custody, and Blackwell was wanted for questioning in connection with loan sharking and other illegal activities. Katherine's ordeal was officially over. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, coming to stand behind her. His arms circled her waist as he rested his chin on her shoulder. "How strange life is," she replied, leaning back against him. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over when Thomas disappeared. Then I was running for my life, terrified and alone. Now here I am, happier than I've ever been." Daniel turned her in his arms to face him. His bruises were already fading, the cut above his eye healing cleanly. "No regrets about staying in Dodge City. It's not an easy place to raise a child. Hope will have something more valuable than easy circumstances," Katherine said, touching his face gently. "She'll have love, a mother who adores her and a father who chose her." Daniel's eyes softened at the word father. "I'll strive to be worthy of that title." "You already are," Katherine assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. From upstairs came the sound of Hope crying, her tiny lungs impressive in their volume. Daniel chuckled against Katherine's lips. "Your daughter is calling," he said. Katherine smiled, her heart full. "Our daughter," she corrected, taking his hand and leading him toward the stairs. As they climbed toward their future together, Katherine thought of the desperate woman who had run across the prairie with a newborn in her arms, bleeding and terrified. That woman could never have imagined the happiness awaiting her, the family she would build from the ashes of her old life. "Thank you for finding us that day," she said softly. Daniel squeezed her hand. "I think, perhaps, we found each other." In the nursery, Hope quieted as soon as she saw them, her tiny face lighting up with what Katherine was certain was recognition. As Daniel lifted the baby, cradling her with the natural ease he'd developed over the past weeks, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. Not running, not hiding, but standing strong beside the man she loved, building a life together in the harsh but beautiful frontier of Dodge City, Kansas. In the years that followed, Katherine would often think back to that rainy day when she'd finally stopped running and found the courage to stay the day she'd chosen love over fear, faith over doubt. Hope grew into a sturdy toddler with her mother's auburn hair and a spirit as boundless as the Kansas prairie. She was soon joined by a brother, Daniel Fletcher, Jr., born exactly 1 year after Katherine and Daniel made their pretend marriage a real one in a simple ceremony at the Dodge City Church. The small house at the edge of town expanded as their family did, with Daniel adding rooms and a wider porch where Katherine would sit in the evenings, watching her children play while waiting for her husband to return from his duties. Occasionally, they would receive news of Thomas Anderson, serving his sentence in a Missouri prison, or Victor Blackwell, whose empire of debt and intimidation had crumbled under legal scrutiny. But these were distant echoes from a life that no longer seemed quite real to Katherine. What was real was the family she and Daniel had created, not just the children they raised, but the community they helped build. Katherine opened a small school for Dodge City's growing population of youngsters, while Daniel eventually rose to the position of marshal, bringing a steady hand to a town slowly transforming from wild frontier outpost to established settlement. And sometimes, on clear spring mornings when the prairie wildflowers bloomed, Katherine would take her children to the spot where Daniel had found her that fateful day. Standing there, with hope running ahead and little Danny in her arms, she would remember the desperation and fear that had driven her forward despite her weakness. "This is where our family began," she would tell the children, "where your father found us and brought us home." It wasn't the whole story. There were parts they were still too young to understand, but it was truth enough. Because no matter how their journey had started, Katherine knew that what mattered most was where it had led. To love, to family, to a home built on trust and courage. To a woman who had once been running, but had finally found where she belonged.